when you have that attitude and you just look for opportunities to improve everything you've been given, people start to listen, right? It takes a little while, but they see that the work you've been doing has been effective and eventually they start to listen.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a free resource for women who work in the sports and entertainment industry. Each week we get real and talk about the things that hold us back and how we can overcome them and keep climbing to the top. And the top is however you define it. We talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Consider this podcast your secret weapon. You will learn from the best in the business and be able to take immediate action with all the advice that you hear. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake, a leadership development coach and consultant. I've worked in sports for 20 years. 15 of those years were spent working for the Red Sox, Dodgers, and the Cubs. After 15 years of working in the front office, I took a leap of faith and I started my own business. Friends, as a Black woman in sports, I know that the industry can take a toll on your confidence and sometimes leave you feeling defeated. Join me each week so I can support you on your journey. I promise you, each week you will feel stronger and more confident than the week before. So let's get started with this week's episode. Y'all are in for a treat today. I mean, all the episodes are a treat, but I am so excited. I got to sit down with Connie Falcone, founder and president of the Firefly Group, a company that she recently founded that helps athletes plan and activate charitable initiatives. Connie has an incredible nonprofit background. Most recently, she was the president of Northwestern Memorial Foundation. And that's the fundraising partner to Northwestern Medicine's 11 hospital system here in Chicago. Connie also served as executive director of Cubs Charities and director of community affairs. And that's where we became work besties. And if you met Connie, you would totally want to call her your work bestie also. In today's episode, we talk about her incredible journey. We talk about things like how to understand your value, what she said to her boss when she learned she wasn't being compensated fairly compared to others, why she decided to quit being a lawyer very early in her career, how she found work in a career that makes her soul sing. We also talk about the strong attributes that leaders possess. All right, Game Over listeners, let's do this. Connie, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I am so excited you are here, and I'm so excited that you're back in sports, selfishly.
Thank you, Jahaan. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, so before we go down your journey and learn all about Connie, can you take us way back in time and tell us when you fell in love with sports?
Yes, I need to share with your podcast listeners that I am a mathlete. I am not an athlete. So sports came to me later in life. And I would say, though, people always called me the smart kid, right? So I was pretty competitive in school, but it was really when my dad took me to my very first Cubs game. And my dad was a guy that worked all the time and he traveled a lot for work. So I discovered the magic of 9 innings with my dad. And so for me, sport meant family. It meant love. It meant time for conversation. And that always really stuck with me, that sport was more than just the competition on the field, but it was the aura that surrounded sport in the stadium with the fans. So that has never left me. And I still recall, even now in my little kid brain, what it was like when dad let you have cotton candy and he would explain the game to you and you had his full undivided attention. It was magic.
I love that. That's beautiful. But all I can think about is the mathlete. Like I'm still stuck there. I said this if we were talking before we hit record. I always learn something new about people I've known for a while. And for those of you listening, I've known Connie. We both worked at the Cubs. She did a reading at my wedding. So we've known each other for a very long time, but I didn't know you were a mathlete. Like I didn't know that about you.
I am an education junkie. Come on. I just keep going back for degrees, as you know. So I love school and I love sport.
Ooh, I have lots of questions about school, but before we get there, why don't you tell everybody what you do now and who you do it for?
So I'm doing 2 things right now. I am currently a fellow at Harvard's Advanced Leadership Initiative, which is a year-long program in which leaders from around the world work on projects that have social impact. So I am doing that as we speak. I'm halfway through the program. And I also just launched my own business. It's called Firefly Group. And what I am doing is I'm working with professional athletes to define their charitable mission and help connect them to effective nonprofits so that we can change the world for the better. And as luck would have it, I think that I'm actually going to be able to use that as my project here at Harvard. So my two worlds are colliding, which is really great.
I was just going to ask, I was like, can you use your new business as like the project? So each fellow does an individual project. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And these are projects that some of them are huge. I want to impact climate change, or I want to help people in prison find jobs when they're released from prison. It could be I want to help first generation college students with career placement. There's some really interesting people in projects.
Tell me this. You have your JD from the University of Notre Dame, MBA from University of Chicago School of Business, and now you are a fellow at Harvard. Now, people who are thinking about going back to school for any of those to advance their career, I'd love to hear like your thoughts if they need to do that.
Yeah, that's a question I get asked a lot. And I think the answer is a really affirmative, it depends. I found, candidly, my law degree has been far more helpful for me in the real world than my MBA. I think the 3 years of legal education prepares you for anything you could imagine, from negotiating to how to research and analyze projects to time management. So I actually recommend law school, even if you don't want to pursue law. And I think in sport in particular, having that legal background can be an asset. That said, if you can't afford it, don't do it. My view on an MBA is slightly different. I think an MBA is a rite of passage. And I think if you can get into and afford a top tier MBA program, what it opens up for you is a network. And so I don't honestly think staying in sports really requires that network and that MBA. If you would like to be an investment banker or go into consulting, the MBA matters. My advice would be, if you had to pick between a law degree or an MBA and you want to stay in sports, I'd recommend going the law route.
When you got your law degree, or when you were going after your law degree, were you planning on being a lawyer?
Yes, I wanted to be a lawyer since I was, I don't know, probably 10 years old. And I went straight from college through to law school, and I practiced law for 2 or 3 years. And honestly, I hated it. I just hated it. And I felt so badly when I quit, because my identity was wrapped up in me being a lawyer and changing the world. And I got to a law firm and realized what I was doing really is making money off of other people's problems. And I was a litigator. And for anybody that's been a litigator, really in law, when you're helping people resolve their issues, nobody walks away happy. It was kind of a soul drain, in addition to just not being at all what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way. Like, you're making money off of other people's problems.
Yeah.
And that just didn't sit well with you.
And I think because I didn't know any lawyers, I didn't have other lawyers in my family. And so I took the first job that was offered to me. And maybe in retrospect, I should have done a little more homework on different areas of law, especially because I came to realize a little bit later in life that the aha moment was I truly was more interested in social justice. And that's what I thought law was. Maybe I just did it wrong. I didn't do enough homework. But again, I do want to reinforce I loved that 3 years of education, and I still lean on it all the time.
So now you're done with being a full-time lawyer or practicing law. Did you have a job lined up?
Not really. So this is where I took a little leap of faith, and I was accepted to the University of Chicago. I moved back to Chicago, and I was living in Denver. So I was a lawyer in Denver. I moved back to Chicago, and I basically begged my dad for a job. He is an entrepreneur, and he had owned software companies that he was in the process of selling a few of them. So I said, why don't you let me manage the lawyers, right? I mean, let's make sure that they're on track and they're, I can just offload this work from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. I created a job for myself with my dad, which is fairly hilarious because literally we would have these conversations about, Connie, how is this going to work? I don't want to rob you of your ability to go find a job. And I'm just like, Dad, I'm asking you for a job. You're not robbing me. I'm like, this is strange that I have to convince my dad I can actually do the work. But I wound up staying with my dad for 12 years. And what I did was convince him that he shouldn't buy whole companies. He should buy pieces of companies. And together we started a little private equity fund. And we would bring in syndicated investors. We invested in a portfolio of 10 companies. And so I spent 12, 13 years with him doing that, which was truly, I learned so much from my dad. I learned so much from the entrepreneurs that I met, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Why did you, and again, learning things about you I did not know. So what an incredible experience to create your own job, but it was with your father. And so you got to grow with him. You're no longer a child, but you still got to grow with him professionally and learn from him. And I'm sure he learned from you. So I can only imagine how incredible that experience was. When did you decide to move on and go into the sports world?
It was partly practical because we had a fund of 10 companies and we were done with that fund. And I think neither one of us really wanted to move on and create a second fund. So it was practical from that standpoint. But at that time, I also had 3 kids that were, I'm going to misremember how old they were, but let's just say my memory of it is I was in my silver minivan literally 5 hours a day. It felt like driving kids between school and appointments and sports, et cetera. So it felt like a really good time just to step back and be a mom for a little while. But that's when I had my epiphany. And I do believe in happy accidents and being open to the universe. I had my daughter's soccer coach approach me and said, hey, my friend and I have started this little nonprofit. They were both substitute teachers in Cabrini Green in Chicago. And they were using soccer as a hook before school to get kids to come play, to be present in school. And they would use soccer and their performance in the classroom to have kids, quote unquote, earn the soccer game day on Fridays. And this was a nonprofit called Urban Initiatives. And they asked me to help them think about how they could build and grow their program. So I said, well, let me see how the program works, because you're telling me all this, but let me come and witness this for myself. So I drove into Cabrini Green, which, I'm a white woman born in the sunlight of opportunity on the North Shore of Chicago. And you tell me I'm going into Cabrini. I was scared. I was just flat out scared.
Tell everybody about Cabrini Green before, so they understand if they're not from Chicago.
So if you're not from Chicago, Cabrini Green is probably one of the most notorious housing projects in the city of Chicago. It has long since been torn down. But what it was these high-rise buildings that literally had cages on the outside. I don't know who thought that it was a good idea to let humans live in this setting, but it was notorious for drug dealing, gangs, crime, et cetera. And right in the middle of Cabrini Green, there's this little school called Schiller School. And I went into Schiller School and I walked into the gym to see how the program was run. And I literally fell in love. I saw these little black and brown kids that were about my kids' age. And they were exactly like my kids who were living on the North Shore. Hopeful, happy, full of optimism, full of, energy and enthusiasm. And my heart sank because I knew their opportunities were limited, that at some point the rope that's been thrown them might be pulled. So I basically just said to Jim and Dan, the co-founders, sign me up. What can I do? And so I went to work for them and helped them build urban initiatives, utilizing everything I knew about for-profit business in the nonprofit setting. And it just was such a joyful opportunity for me because all of a sudden I was getting to have the impact, that social justice work, the kind of work that fills your soul tank. And I loved it.
And so I remember urban initiatives. So you kind of found your niche, so to speak, when you started to do that work. It spoke to you and it was something, tell me if I'm getting this right, but it was something you can see yourself doing forever.
Forever. I had loved my job with my dad, but I didn't know you could have a job that made your soul sing. I didn't know this could be so inspiring to go into work every day. And that's what urban initiatives did for me, is it really changed my thinking about mission-focused work.
What was the culture like in that setting?
I guess you would think of it as a startup culture, but in a very strange way. We tried to build the enterprise with the people that we served. So, perfect example. Well, let me even backtrack you further. Jim and Dan had no office. They had a minivan with the back seats that were pulled out, and they carried around their files in a Tupperware bin in the back of the van. And I said, you guys, you have to get an office. This is crazy. We need a place to store the soccer balls, the files, et cetera. We're going to have to hire staff. So thankfully, we were able to find a company that was willing to donate space, but it was raw space. So we hired there were two boys that were participants in the Urban Initiatives program, and we hired their dad to come paint and help us build out the space. We utilized volunteers from Cabrini and from the families of the kids that we served. So it was top to bottom a grassroots organization that Jim and Dan always just kept joyful. We hired young people. We served young people. I think you even may have served on the junior board there too, didn't you? Didn't you go coach and volunteer?
I did go coach. Yeah, I did go coach and volunteer, and it was really fun. And I often think about, why am I not doing that, like still with them?
Yeah. Well, you can. They're
know.
still there. So yeah, PSA for Urban Initiatives, if you'd like to get involved, they're always taking volunteer coaches.
Yeah, that would be so fun. Okay, sorry, I'm getting off track and thinking about myself.
But you should. But I love going back there, and those kids will yell at me because I'm a terrible soccer player. And they're like, Coach Connie, if you're a goalie, you're supposed to catch the ball. So it's hilarious.
So I love that. So I'm glad I asked about the culture, because it's exactly what I would envision. It's just all of you, correct me if I'm wrong here, but all of you working towards one common goal. Now I know it's like that in all organizations, but you guys were really building it. You were building the plane, why you were flying it. I imagine just the focus and the passion and the dedication that you guys had was all the same, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Everybody who's working there was just okay, this is what we need to get done. And you were doing whatever it took to get it done. You weren't worrying about all the other different pieces in an organization. For example, sports, you're not worried about the sponsorship team and what sponsors to use and what this to do. You know what I mean? And you're not worried about the operations of having 30,000 people at your house, because you're just focused on the community, really. Is that right?
Yeah, it is right. I think you've given me the title of my book, if ever I write it, which is called Building and Flying, because I feel like that has been my life in the nonprofit space. But what it was, and you've said it well, it was an opportunity to create a culture without distraction. So we knew how we wanted to be, and we were very clear on the mission, and we just made it happen. You just make it happen. You bootstrap and make it happen. And I remember our first hire, who she's still there, actually, Julie, and she's a great leader of the organization at this point. But we would build things when we needed them. Okay, so now I think we need somebody to help us with participant surveys. Let's go find it. Okay, now we need help with development. Let's go find it. And it was really fun. It was very creative. And just, again, everybody was aligned on mission. So it was a great place to be at that time.
How was the transition from that into corporate? I'm using air quotes, everybody, but going to work for the Cubs, going to work for Northwestern and serving as president. How was it, a culture shock?
I think the transition to the Cubs was less of a culture shock than the transition to Northwestern. And the transition from sport to sport made sense. And I think there's something about working in sports where everybody is naturally focused on the same goal. And transitioning into the Cubs, the Ricketts family made it really clear. If you'll recall, because we were both there at the time, it was win a World Series, preserve and renovate Wrigley Field, and be a good neighbor. So I really honed in on this notion that it was part of ownership goals to be a good neighbor, which was great. That was validation for the work that I was hired to do. What I found really interesting is that all of a sudden now I had to convince people why it was good to make a positive impact in the community. And my work was really, if you think about it, nonprofit work in a for-profit enterprise. So that's a really
Hmm.
interesting space to be. And it is a space where I know I leaned on my previous experience in the private equity space, where I really understood business models, like for-profit business models. I was able to see that intersection of where for-profit and nonprofit could move the Cubs charities forward. So it didn't mean that I didn't bang my head against a wall on a regular basis, because there are just certain people who, not going to name names, but there are people who didn't see the benefit of the work that you would do in the community. They're not looking at the long game. If I'm
Yeah.
out sharing baseball with kids in the communities that ultimately are going to be our fans, I'm building the next generation of baseball fans.
So you're leading a team. Your title was you had two titles, correct? You were like executive director of Cubs Charities and then director of community relations. Did I get that right?
Yeah, director of community affairs. Yeah.
And how did you, so you're managing this team. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you and I worked in a non-revenue generating department. And so, like you said, there were times when you had to bang your head against the wall. How did you manage your team? Because I'm sure if you're banging your head against the wall every now and then, I'm sure they're doing it. And then I obviously know that some of them really were doing that. So how did you lead them? I think I know how you did, but I want everyone else to hear, because everyone who worked for you loved working for you. And you did from where I sat, like incredible job at just keeping them focused on the big picture. So I'm just curious what was going on behind the scenes?
I think one of the attributes of a strong leader, which I can say now looking backwards, is going to battle for your team. And I think I did go in and fight on a daily basis for the work that we were trying to accomplish. And I hope that my team felt me having their back, number one, but also number two, didn't feel the same amount of conflict that I did. I felt like that was my job. It was my job to absorb that conflict. I think the other thing is the Cubs recognized, and you were this way too, Jahaan. I remember the first time we sat down at that Starbucks across from Wrigley Field, and here we were given this job, right? And you and I took a look at this job, which for all of your listeners was the Wives program, the Players' Wives program, which nobody had paid much attention to. We were handed some roles in this program, and we looked at it and said, okay, here it is. This isn't great. Let's knock it out of the park. And when you have that attitude and you just look for opportunities to improve everything you've been given, people start to listen, right? It takes a little while, but they see that the work you've been doing has been effective, and eventually they start to listen. I'm not 100% sure if that answered your question, but I do think that the team respected the fact that I would go to battle for them. And I always said, as long as I know what you're doing, as long as you keep me informed, I will have your back. And I did.
Some of the toughest conversations we have are the ones that we have with ourselves. We can convince ourselves to believe stories that we don't even know are true. What's crazy is we allow that story to take a toll on our confidence. Have you been there before? I know that I have. We get in our heads, we beat ourselves up. Here's some tough love. Nobody's got time for that. We are high achieving women who have big career goals. We don't have time to get in our own way. And I am here to support you with my new one-on-one coaching program, Step Into Your Power and Own Your Career. My clients have told me that when we work together, I've helped them get out of their own way, regain their confidence, learn how to manage their emotion and mindset. They've told me that they've been able to get their voice back and use it with confidence. The most important thing, they've told me that we've identified the obstacle that was getting in their way. If you want to learn more about this program, scroll down in the show notes, click on the link that says Step Into Your Power and Own Your Career. You can set up time to chat with me and we can figure out if this is the right program for what you need. All right, let's get back to the episode. Absorbing that conflict, that's a heavy load to carry. How did you manage your mindset during that time? Because for me and for a lot of listeners, I love to talk about anxiety, imposter syndrome, self-doubt. So when you're in that environment, it starts to weigh on you. So how did you manage your mindset?
Exercise has always been important for me. And I will notice myself getting edgy if I haven't just had some type of physical movement on a regular basis. So that's one thing that's important to me. And again, remember, I'm a mathlete, no athlete. It's not a lot of physical movement, but it's just enough to take me out of my headspace. And so that's helpful. I think also I really wouldn't go to battle unless I knew I was right. So having the
Okay.
courage of I think the courage of your convictions is important. And that might mean doing your homework. That might mean doing a little bit of advance work with the people that may or may not be impacted by what you're suggesting. It's really coming full on prepared to have that conversation, discussion, battle, whatever it may be. I think I'm a slight over preparer.
I like that. You went to battle for things where you knew you were right. Doesn't mean you won that battle every time, but you knew in your heart, like, this is right. This is right for this organization. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And this is where, and I'm going to put in a shameless plug for you, but having a work BFF and you and I shared a work husband, I mean, none of us worked on the same team, but I could bounce my ideas off you and you would always give me an honest answer. That's why I think you are currently in your perfect role. And that was really important to me. It's less of a mentor, and I like to refer to it almost as sponsorship, right? You would tell me if I was going to step in it. Our friend Andy would tell me if I was going to step in it. And so having a couple people that I could bounce ideas off of before I tried it on my superiors was really helpful.
Yeah. This leads to the next question, or it just popped in my head. But so having that sort of network or sponsorship, work bestie, work husband that you share, whatever you want to call it, like how, when you moved over to starting your own business, and we'll get back to Northwestern, but when you started your own business, were you, I mean, you're brand new in this, but are you surrounding yourself with that same sort of support?
I am trying to, and I will tell you, it's terrifying. Being an entrepreneur is so scary. The fear of failure chasm is huge. I've always admired entrepreneurs, and I feel like I lived in that world in my private equity days. And what's really interesting is I don't feel like them. So it's a little bit scary for me. And thankfully, here at Harvard, I have met a couple of extraordinary women, one of whom started her own business and sold it recently very successfully. And she has been a really strong asset for me. And I think ultimately will probably sit on an advisory board that I may create. And she's a cheerleader as well as a very practical business advisor. And I'm finding I need a couple cheerleaders in my corner right now to help me say, like, you got this. You know, today I had lunch with two of my friends and they asked me about what I was doing. And they said, well, you know, what you said makes a lot of sense, but you need to be more excited about what you're doing. You know, what you're doing is fantastic. And so I'm trying to sort of channel all this great advice from the people around me. But I'll tell you, it's scary.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary. And I think I made that leap of faith 5 or 6 years ago, and it's still scary. And like, just for me, I think if you drill down, it's that uncertainty, like just the not knowing for me drives me mad. Like, and when you have a full-time job, you know, you work for an organization, there's still some uncertainty. You can be fired, there can be layoffs, but to some extent, you feel like you have a little bit of control and you know where your paycheck's coming from every couple of weeks. Like, there's just that calm. And I know for me, the uncertainty drove me mad to the point where I ate a lot of pizza, and I'm lactose intolerant, and it didn't it's still on these hips, and like I can't get rid of it, but like it is what it is. But surrounding yourself with people, and I didn't think I needed it then, which is really funny. I was like, I'll be fine. No, you need to always surround yourself with people, no matter what you're doing or what stage in your career you're in. You need to constantly talk to people and have those cheerleaders. Like, for sure, the cheerleader, I would say, is the most important thing.
I agree. And thankfully, my parents are still alive, but they can't be your parents, right? The cheerleader has to be somebody that is in the workplace. I mean, your parents are supposed to be your cheerleaders, but it's somebody that you think has gravitas or understanding. And it's that encouragement that makes such a big difference. I
Mm.
think the other thing that's really scary for me too is one, I know I'm not a solopreneur. I'm not even sure that's the right word, but I don't want to do this myself. I really want to build a team. I function better in a team. I love having a team around me. And so, in order to really build an effective team, I have to do client development. I am a human being that can go
Mm.
sit across from someone and ask them for $50 million. And yet, the client development piece is selling myself. And I'm just not comfortable with that, I should say. I hope
Yeah.
I can get good at it, but it feels funny to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that'll shift when you have a team that is relying on you.
Yeah.
So
Then
now
it'll
it's
be
almost
even
like you're doing it for
scarier.
them. Oh,
It'll be even
yes.
scarier. Oh,
Yes.
man.
Yeah, I'm not doing a good
But
job being a cheerleader here. I'm doing that honest thing again. But yeah, it definitely makes a big difference. I'm just so happy that you're doing this. Like, we've always talked about these different ideas. And like when I heard you finally took the leap of faith, like it really, like, yes, it makes sense. And there's some comfort in knowing that there's some fear behind that. Because like you said, you using your words, like you came from the land of opportunity, right? The North Shore, but there's some fear and anxiety behind all that.
surprise, I'm human. I think, honestly, when I look at my career on paper, I'm impressed with myself. But that's not what it feels like
That's,
on the inside.
yes.
I'm still human, and I really want this to be successful for so many reasons. And
Mhm.
ultimately, I mean, my work and the reason I'm doing it is to have impact on the end beneficiary of the work that I'm doing with athletes, right? But what's also really neat is that I'm almost creating and defining a space that there are others that operate in the place that Firefly Group is operating. I mean, there are certainly nonprofits that are helping players give back. There are certainly financial advisors that are helping players think about where they can make philanthropic investment. But nobody's really sitting down with a player and talking about their brand. Who are you? What matters to you? What would make the world a better place in your mind? Finding the nonprofits that actually are effective in that space and then marrying all of that together. So creating fundraising opportunities and really ultimately impacting the people that the nonprofit is helping to improve their lives.
Is there any question, like, or is there any topic we haven't talked about that you wish I would ask you a question about?
One of the things that I've heard you talk about before is knowing your value. So I don't know how many people on your podcast, because I now love listening to it, talk about that, especially when you're trying to advocate for pay raises, et cetera. I have a flip on that. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, because certainly I hit the plexiglass ceiling in sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about your values. Like, I really think it's important to understand your values and see them reflected in the workplace. For example, I may not be able to articulate this extremely well, but you, Jahaan, might have your top three values that are different than my top three values. But I can't work in a place that feels like it's running counter to those values. So I think it's really understanding how you present in the workplace, but what about your work means so much to you. And for me, innovation is a critical piece. It's also being appreciated, and if that means your pay or a few attaboys. But I just encourage people to think about what are those top three values that you bring to the workplace and make sure that that culture is consistent with your values.
So what I hear you saying is have your values, and if there's a conflict, maybe that's not the right place for you. Is that right?
I think you do one of two things. One, it's an indicator to you that the culture may not be for you. And I think culture is really critical in our enjoyment of our workplace. But that doesn't mean you leave. It can also mean you try to
Mm-hmm.
change it, because other people may also be impacted by what you're seeing in the workplace. So, I mean, I would always think about whether or not it's systemic. And if so, it's harder to change, not impossible. Or is this just something that nobody has thought about before? So you can earn
Mm.
a star for your helmet if you bring it forward and you enact that positive change.
Yeah, I love the way you just said that. That was well said. It's okay to go to a battle. It's the best word I can think of right now, but to go to battle for the things you believe in, your values, before you just walk away. Now it's different for everybody, right? Some people are like, I don't want to go to battle. I don't want to be the one who changes it. I want to just be in it. And that's the best environment for me. I do feel like a lot of the women a lot of my clients and listeners are very ambitious and want to make change and don't care if it's difficult and challenging along the way. So I love the thought of just understanding what your values are and making sure you can see those reflected in the organization. How do you do that before you accept a job?
It's so hard. It's really hard.
Sure is.
I think it's important for you to check references, just like it's important for your employer to check references. And I think to the extent you can lean on your networks to help identify somebody that may or may not have had experience working there. They may not have worked there directly, but maybe they're a vendor to the place that you're looking to work. And just to get a sense for how people feel about working there. What is the promotion track like? What's the expectation of your workday? True story. I get up early. My husband thinks I'm a farmer in a former life. Like, I wake up early. When I started working for the Cubs, I'd show up at work at 7 a.m. Like by 5 o'clock, I am peace out. I'm exhausted. And people were like, "You're leaving? It's 5 o'clock." I'm like, "Well, that's because you didn't get in till 9:30. Well, guess what? You have to change your day when you work in sports. Nobody gets there at 7:30 in the morning. So that's one thing I could live with, but that would have been really great to know before I accepted that position. I still would have said yes. I just wouldn't have showed up the first day at 7 in the morning.
7? What time do you wake up?
I really like to wake up when it's still dark, but I wake up at 5:30 usually.
What? Wow. Yeah, it's really early.
Yeah. Well, sleep is the cousin of death. There's stuff to get done in the morning when no one else is awake.
I can't believe you go to work at 7 a.m. That definitely did not work. I was the 9:30. I was on the 9:30 train, like just rolling in.
I learned pretty quickly.
So, all right. So I like the values and I like how you can sometimes check. It is difficult to do, but like, how do you make sure the company aligns? Because everyone puts their best foot forward during the interview process and everyone has their representative, right? Like I always said to my husband, I was like, I want the representative back from when we first met, like that first year when you would like hold the car door open for me. But like, that's what happens, right? You go on an interview and everyone puts their best foot forward and then like stuff gets real. So let me ask you this, because I feel like you were going to have some great insight on it. No pressure. But how do you make sure you're paid your worth? So now you're making sure that the values align, the company's values align. And then how do you make sure that you're always paid your worth, especially when you're asking for promotions and raises?
I think it's important, one, that you know your worth. Two things I always say to people that are on my team is, one, have your resume ready, always. Keep your resume updated. And two, pay attention to the marketplace, right? There's so much information at our fingertips on the internet right now. I mean, just plug it into the Google and, enter your title and figure out what people are being paid in your city, because there are averages that are produced. So understand what you're being paid. I think, and this is in real life happened to me, when you suspect that you're not being paid the same as a man, because ladies, it's still happening out there. I just marched into my boss's office and I said, here's the thing. Am I being paid the same as X, this director? That was a man. No answer. And I said, I tell you what, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to come back tomorrow morning. And if I'm not being paid the same as said person, then I will expect to have a raise, by the end of the week. And I did. And I think sadly, we still have to do that. But, nobody wants a lawsuit. And I just think it makes good sense to just really to understand what your worth is in the marketplace and have that resume ready.
Love that you went into the office and just said that. And I feel like you just were very straightforward. If I had to imagine, I was not there. But what do you say to people who feel like, I don't want to rock the boat? I don't want to be disrespectful to my manager. Maybe it's not their fault. Maybe it's the company and whatever. Like, right, we start to make up these stories in our head to avoid the conflict of having to go in and say exactly what you just said. By the way, I feel like everyone should just write that down. And like, if you ever need to use it, say those exact words.
Yeah, you know what can be really disarming and is probably a great tack to take for some of your listeners? It's asking your manager for advice. And here's potentially a way to think about it that feels less confrontational. So I'm going to assume that in your position, you would hope to be in a different promoted position in a number of years. I would prepare for a conversation with your manager where you say, here's what I've done. Here's what I'm currently doing. Here's what I think I can do to be at this place in 2 or 3 years. And this is the salary that I would expect in 2 or 3 years. So how can you advise me, boss? How can you advise me on my path? And can I enlist your help and support in getting me to this place? That feels a lot more collaborative and I think can be actually disarming to a manager. And a good manager who's a coaching style manager, I think would invest in the time and the advice with that person.
Yeah. See, I like both options, right? So listeners, like, pick which one works for you. Like, if you just want to be straightforward and say a sentence and just like Connie did, do it. If you want to take a different approach, that one doesn't just feel right to you, it's okay. Whatever works for you. I don't know if you feel this way, Connie, but sometimes I just see like the narrative out there is just like, go get what, you deserve and don't take less. And so it's like, well, yeah, but how do I do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to do that, but I don't want to be, I don't want to be rude when I do it. And I don't know how to say it without being rude or sounding like I'm bragging about myself. Like I get that a lot from clients and friends who are like, I want to be a team player. Like, it's just, I want my money, but I also want to be a team player.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one way to look at it is look at what you're doing for your team and the people that follow you. If you take the time to go and advocate for what you believe your position is owed from a salary standpoint. So that might be one way to think about it. And I think for people that do a great job and lead where they are and give 110% and I just think that the organization can find a little bit of money for those people. I really do. I mean, I've been that person. I've been the one who sat across from the junior, associate or what have you, that was asking for advice and was asking for a raise. And as a leader, you sit there and think to yourself, this person is right. I want to see them grow within the organization. I want to do what I can to keep them.
Yeah. You bring up a good point too. A lot of leaders agree, like, yeah, you should get a promotion and I'm going to go to bat for you. I think one of the hardest things for leaders to accept is when you get told, no, I can't give your employee a raise and I can't tell you when I can. Like that is one of the hardest things, I think, to accept.
One of the issues that we have now as leaders is we're given a finite pool that we have to distribute amongst our staff. And I can remember at the Cubs thinking, okay, if I give person X a 5% raise, that means person Y is only getting a 2% raise. And by gum, everybody deserves a 10% raise. So, I mean, we are put in tough situations with our staff, but that's when I think a good leader sits down and says, this is the best I can do, but I want to think about other ways in which I can help enrich your experience here. How about I send you to the MLB conference? You find other ways that hopefully will help enrich their experience when your hands are tied with salary.
And I imagine that you're transparent when you're having those conversations.
I cannot tell a lie. I cannot
Same.
tell a lie.
Same.
I can't.
I can't either because I smile as soon as I start to lie. I smile. I think I've always been like that, and like it's really annoying because my husband, like, I can never like tell, like, if he asks me something like about, oh, did you just go shopping? Didn't you say you want to save money? Like, I can't even like lie that I had like gift cards or something because I just get this little smirk on my face. But yes, same thing. So I've always felt like transparency is just my best friend, and it helps when you're managing a team for sure.
It does. It really does.
Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Ooh, I hope so.
I just looked at the time. I was like, oh, we've been talking for a while. So, all right, 12 questions. Whatever comes to first to your mind. That's it. You can't overthink it. All right.
Okay.
What is your favorite sports moment?
It had to have been the World Series parade on the trolley for the Chicago Cubs 2016 World Series win when we made the turn and I got a view down Michigan Avenue South. And I have never seen more people in my whole entire life. And I realized right then and there what that win meant to humanity.
Did you get tears in your eyes?
Yeah, tears and chills and you name it, the whole panoply of emotion.
Yes. What is something people always get wrong about you?
That I'm serious. I'm so much fun.
I mean, you are, but that was really funny the way you said it. What is one food you wouldn't want to give up?
Pizza.
Are you a morning or a night person?
Morning for sure.
Oh, right. The 5:30 a.m. or favorite holiday.
Thanksgiving, family and food, and I love to cook. It's the best.
Dog or a cat person?
Dog. No offense to cat people. Don't understand it.
I really don't. I try. I really do try. I have a client who has lots of cats, and if she's listening, hey, but I'm like, look at those cats just crawling everywhere. Like they're just, I don't know.
They don't run up to the door to greet you. That's what I need. I just need somebody at the end of my day to be happy that I'm there.
That's fair. It's probably why I have 2 dogs in a foster right now, because I need all the love I can get. And also cats sneak up on you. Like they just, I don't like that.
I'm not sneaky doesn't work for me.
No, not at all. What product would you seriously stockpile if you found out they weren't going to sell it anymore?
Ooh, I've heard you ask this before. This is a tough one for me because I'm pretty sure there's not a product I couldn't live without. I do love this Laneige lip balm, I guess is what it is. You put it on at night before you go to bed, and my daughter got me hooked on it. And it just, you wake up with these soft, silky lips, and I'm ready to go kiss the day.
You just did an ad for them. I would send this clip to them. Wait, spell it.
I think it's like snow in French. I could be wrong. It's Laneige. It's a little pot. You get it at Sephora, and it's sort of like magic.
All right. Well, I'm going to link to it in the show notes because everyone wants silky lips. Like that sounds incredible, especially in the wintertime. All right. I'm making rapid fire questions longer. It's my fault. We were really doing well. And then I just got off task. What is your favorite app?
Peloton.
Oh.
Can I talk about that a little bit? Because here's why.
Yeah.
One of the things I've started doing, so I use the Peloton app for exercise, even if I don't have a Peloton, you just go on a treadmill or a walk. But I've started using it for meditation to fall asleep because I can't turn my brain off. So now I'm telling you, it has really worked for me. I don't know if it'll work for everybody, but for me, doing that 5 or 10-minute sleep meditation has been a game changer.
Oh, it's so interesting. I listen to podcasts. I hope none of you listen to my podcast to fall asleep, but I listen to like stories. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't listen to like a business podcast because I will get 1,000 ideas and I won't be able to sleep. But like I have to listen to this. I always tell Scott, this is probably TMI guys, but I'll tell Scott like, oh, can you tell me a story? And he's like, no. I'm like, fine. So like finally I just started listening to podcasts so I can fall asleep to a story. Okay, Peloton app. That's a good one. All right, Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram?
Oh, this is where you know me, Jahaan, and you know that probably none of those because I am so techno illiterate. But I do love to scroll through Instagram.
Okay. All right. I do like when you post a selfie because they're always funny. It just so you guys know,
terrible.
Yeah, Connie's not good at selfies. Self-proclaimed. I'm not saying this. This is what she says about herself. All right. Who's your biggest inspiration in life?
It would definitely be my kids. I really want the world to be a better place for them. So they inspire me on the daily.
We know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. As a child, what did you want to become when you grew up?
Well, I wanted to be a lawyer, but I don't know. That didn't really work out for me. So I think I keep reinventing what I want to be when I grow up.
Ooh, well said. All right, last one. Finish this sentence. The future of women working in sports is?
Now.
Yes, 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 yes. Connie, this has been an amazing conversation. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
They could email me at my new company, connie.falcone@fireflygroupadvisors.com. And I would love to hear from people because I'm hoping to be building a team soon. So keep me in mind as you think about maybe even contract labor, because I definitely don't want to be doing this alone. So
Yes.
I was also going to say, my website is not up yet, but it might be by the time your listeners hear. So that's fireflygroupadvisors.com. And one of these days I'll set up an Instagram account for that. I think I just have a picture on there for now. So don't go looking for it.
I understand that. Instagram, all the socials are a lot of work, but perhaps that can be somebody on your team's job.
Yes. If you want to help with social media, reach out to me.
Yeah. Ooh, I like it. All right. I'm linked to all that stuff in the show notes. And I will tell you guys, I have not worked for Connie, but I've worked with her and she is the best manager and I would totally work for her. So if you want to get involved in a startup that's doing something impactful in the world, Connie is your woman. You definitely want to work for her. See, oh, cheerleader. Look at me.
Oh, you're the best. You're the best, Jahaan. I wish that we still worked together too. So we'll have to we'll keep each other on our advisory board lists.
Yes, 100%. Connie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jahaan. This is awesome. Just a great chat. Loved it.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.